Welcome, everybody, to the Magnolia Media Network. I'm Jonathan M. Ruggiero, Democratic activist and longtime party member. I'm also the founder of this little sort of podunk media network, which we've put together over the last, 6 months to a year. As far as I know, we're the only media network with a podcast 3 or 4 times a week that prides itself on being progressive and pro-democratic. That includes supporting our allies like Ukraine and Eastern Europe. We hope that you'll tune in and check out our podcast by searching Magnolia Media Pod wherever you get your podcasts. And well, today we're jumping right in on a story that I just had to come on and talk about. And that's Donald Trump's post of himself with some 14-year-old girls. Now, this comes from an article in 1991 when Donald Trump would have been approximately 45 years of age. The girls in that picture are roughly 14 years of age. Even if you are MAGA, stop and consider for a moment having a beauty pageant contestant for a daughter, niece, granddaughter, etc., and then having her fall prey to any 45-year-old man. Now, I know he's a God king to many of those on the far right end of the spectrum, the so far right you're no longer conservative scale of the spectrum. This man is a threat, a danger. He wasn't only a threat and danger to his own children, but to the children of others. Their story continues. He threw a party on a yacht and then a rave-like adventure in one of his hotels in New York City. All of this also ties him to Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein 6 years later in 1997, when he was hosting yet another beauty pageant, one in which he bragged about his ability to go backstage and basically eyeball undressed women who were trying to do a job and further their careers. He also took part in trying to woo a British supermodel, 20 years old at the time. Meanwhile, Trump was 50. However, she had dated other older men. Some women do that. This is just more evidence that a man who was found civilly liable for rape could once again be president of the United States. Now we know all of those nasty details we didn't know going into 2016. And while, yes, I've been a Democratic activist most of my life and a member of the Democratic Party, therefore, I can't say that I've ever voted for a Republican. I have agreed with Republicans at times. Former Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam is exactly the type of traditional conservative with whom I've had a lot of agreement, including his attempt to expand Medicaid in the state of Tennessee. And I truly believe that he is a decent man, much like Mitt Romney. And of course, the way John McCain was. But what the Republican Party has become today is so out there that Liz Cheney, yes, Liz Cheney from Wyoming, is no longer conservative enough for their party. Because it's not a party, it's an organization built to support but one man, and that's Donald Trump. Everyone else can and will eventually be thrown under the bus, including once the Trumpist fever in this country breaks. And it will break. Certain groups of people won't give up on it easily, but they'll be pushed to the side. I mean, look at all the attorneys who've had to go get attorneys. Everyone around him ends up defending themselves on their own from a legitimate Department of Justice. Now, academics on the right have long since fled the modern Republican Party. We have to make sure that their voices are amplified so that conservatives, traditional conservatives, understand that there is only one choice this November when it comes to voting for president. And of course, that's President Biden. Let's talk about President Biden for a moment. Not only do we have historic job numbers and so many consecutive months of unemployment below 4%, it runs back like 50 years. Wages now outpace inflation for the first time in decades. The U.S. economy is growing at a rate we haven't seen in decades. And while prices remain stubbornly high in certain sectors, especially in groceries and gasoline, the president is doing what he can to bring those prices down. Not to mention the stock market has hit record highs in all three major indices over the last several weeks. The Dow Jones breaking the $40,000 mark, the S&P 500 breaking the 5,000 point mark weeks ago, and the NASDAQ continuing to soar as companies like NVIDIA add the GDP of Canada in a single year. That's right, the entire GDP of Canada, a country we think of as very modern and, well, wealthy by most standards. But at any rate, if we're going to protect this precious democracy of ours, if we're going to have elections again in the future, which I hope we do, I don't know about you, but if I don't like the person in charge, I want the opportunity to, swap them out, Democrat or Republican. But we can't depend on legacy media anymore, from MSNBC to Fox News. They're never giving you the entire truth, or, and we don't expect this from Fox News, actually explaining the desperation of the situation to try to get that across to their viewers and their readers. The New York Times is more guilty of this than anyone, or guiltier. And that's why we have to create a community online based in the eye of the storm, Knoxville, Tennessee, to expose some of what's going on. I mean, this is a toxic environment we find ourselves in. An environment where so many people have decided to just follow the clan, follow the cult, follow the folks you went to church with who went astray, but to keep from looking silly, you decided to join them for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. But now it's time to backtrack, because people's lives are at risk from migrants, and there are no illegal aliens. We're talking about migrants coming to the border and trying to get asylum, most of them women and children. The drug trade, or drugs get into this country through traditional ports of entry, especially shipping containers. And they don't come from south of the border, they come from north of the border. And this populist idea of closing America off from the rest of the world is absurd. We've seen these populist movements in the past, like when Americans sided with Hitler before World War II and didn't want to get involved in a European war. Or during the Civil War, when so many Confederate sympathizers worked inside the halls of government, therefore pushing war off as long as possible so that they could keep other human beings in bondage. And it turns out the Vice President of the United States, a fellow Tennessean named Andrew Johnson, who took office on April 14, 1865, was among those who intended to do harm to our precious Union. But we survived. We survived January 6, 2021. We survived 9/11, 2001. We survived Pearl Harbor. Now we have to survive a threat from within. Now I think President Biden should start every day reminding America that there are traitors in the House, traitors in the Senate, from Ron Johnson to Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene to Lauren Boebert, that mean to do this country harm. And the proof is, well, Tucker Carlson took a job with Russian state TV, where he now works or is a partner with, whatever, to Ron Johnson spending July 4th, 2019 in Moscow. And for polling, well, let's talk about polls for a moment. We know people vote up and down the ballot for the same party in almost every state, with the exception of maybe Maine, Montana. And Bob Casey in Pennsylvania is leading in his Senate race. Of course, he's a Democratic incumbent. Gary Peters in Michigan, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, Jackie Rosen in Nevada, and soon to be new Democratic senator from the state of Arizona, Ruben Gallego. Especially since Kyrsten Sinema dropped out of the race because she realized she was only pulling votes away from wacko Carrie Lake. I would say Carrie Lake's the queen of Macedonia, but then again, you have puppy murderer Kristi Noem, also known as the governor of South Dakota. Why do we have two Dakotas? No state of Washington, D.C., but we have two Dakotas. Just to get to a nice round number, like 50. Makes no sense at all. The absurdity continues as women's health care and women's rights are under attack, and so is contraception. We see it now in the state of Louisiana as they try to recategorize drugs used for abortion and call them dangerous, put them on a controlled substance list, which they are allowed to do within that state, despite the fact they have no negative side effect. One can't get addicted to methotrexate or mesoprextil, if I'm pronouncing that right. I know there are pharmacists out there who are going to scream when they see this, if they see this, and hopefully they do, because I know I butchered those two names. But for the time being, we have to do all that we can to ensure that America remains a peaceful and law-abiding country, even if we have this new element of Nazism, the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and other hate groups. And I mean, they hate, from Hispanic Americans to Jewish Americans, Black Americans, Asian Americans. They hate, and their hate is all they have. So we must push back as a responsible and reliable nation. We cannot allow the entire world order to be toppled by 35% of the population because some of us have a problem with President Biden and his handling of, I don't know, Gaza, or we're upset with President Biden for imaginary reasons. An immigration crisis that doesn't exist, an inflation crisis that has long since subsided. We're talking about a 1 or 2% increase. The rest of it is corporate price gouging, and let's call it what it is. And let us not forget that at no point in time was the Trump administration's economic policies doing more for America than Joe Biden's. Bidenomics is a real thing, and it really works. And by the way, just as I'm recording this, I understand that President Biden is releasing another 1 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, since what he released a year or 2 years ago has been replaced. And there's more oil in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve now than there has been at any time previous. We have to take our country serious. We have to take this election serious. We have to ensure that we are engaging young voters, voters of color, and people who need to understand what will happen to, let's say, Gaza, for example, if there's a Trump administration with a Republican Senate and House. First of all, there may never be another election again in the United States, and it really is that bad, and it really is that scary, and I don't care if I sound alarmist. We're talking about the complete eradication of the Palestinian people, and possibly a war with Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, would shoot gas to $10 a gallon. We're talking about an instant 10% inflation added to everything you buy in the United States because of a blanket tariff that's going into effect, that Trump says is going to effect on day one. We're going to see the radicalization of the Department of Justice as all of your traditional, nonpartisan attorneys leave and head for, your guess is as good as mine, as Trump sycophants take those jobs. This is what it is. This is what's at stake. Look at Samuel Alito, a hate flag being flown at his private residence, his primary residence in Virginia, another at his summer home in New Jersey just last summer. Clarence Thomas and his involvement with Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo. The Supreme Court is compromised. The Republican Party is compromised in the House and in the Senate. And as we saw with the spineless Nikki Haley, they will all eventually destroy their political career to say that they will vote for Donald Trump, even if they won't endorse him. And you can see the disgust in their eyes as they do it, with the exception of Tim Scott, who I've been surprised to see relishes the opportunity to subvert democracy. That's where we're at, folks. That's why we created our little media network. So check us out. Again, at the Magnolia Media Network. And to find our podcast, it's the Magnolia Media Pod, available wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button for us, please. Leave a comment and subscribe. I'll be posting here more and more often, as we are just sort of transitioning, at least to these short videos on YouTube. Again, my name is Jonathan M. Ruggiero, here for the Magnolia Media Network. Please like and subscribe. And don't forget to maybe leave a little comment down at the bottom. Thank you so much.